So the concept or the idea for this video was born a mere 2 hours ago when I was at work and I persuaded a customer to not go for the book that they had in hand in favor of another, in my opinion, much better read. And here we are. On my way home, I made a list of books that I consider to not be so great, but if you either gravitated towards these or there's something about them that you think you're going to like, I thought I would give alternatives to better reads that I think are worthwhile of your time as opposed to these other books. Now, I do want to preface by saying, obviously, book tastes are so incredibly subjective, and I know that my job isn't to force what I like onto other people, but I do have a general rule, and that is if I have started a conversation with a customer and we understand our reading taste, or if they collide in any way, then I am more tempted to recommend things that I personally have read and really enjoyed. So in the case of this customer, we'd already been talking for 25 minutes and they asked me what do you think of this book? And usually I just give my honest opinion, and I was like, no sis, put that away right now. Let me just show you what I would read instead. So that's what I did, but I don't go around doing that all the time. If somebody's checking out and I see the book and it's not one that I like, I'm not about to be like, I wouldn't do that if I were you. You know what I mean? That's just so out of left field. I would get fired. But if I'm already in conversation with them and I know that we have similar reading tastes, then I'll likely just steer them in the right direction, if you will. So yeah, I'm not a crazy bookseller that just shits on books 24/7 and just tells people not to buy what they want to read. So yeah. So anyways, the book in question and the customer that sparked this video idea, she was really interested in sex work and just anything to do with discussions around sex and power, and she had pretty broad interests, and she had picked up the book Tomorrow Sex Will Be Good Again by, I'm not sure who it is, but I read that and I was so disappointed in just how limited the scope was. It was very heteronormative, and I just thought it could have been so much more nuanced and so much more of an interesting read, but really it was just a regurgitation of information that is already out there without any sort of originality in my eyes, and just like I said in that video, basically just a syllabus in a form of a thin novel, because she just referenced so many other journals or articles or research that is already out there without contributing anything to the conversation. And again, it was very heteronormative and had a very limited view of what sex is. So I was immediately like, oh, no. We cannot walk out of the store with that. I think you're looking for something much richer and interesting and nuanced. So let me point you to this book. And that book in question is The Right to Sex. Now, I haven't read it, but at this point, with so many cataloged hours of other people's reviews, I can more or less gauge when I'm going to vibe with a book or when a book is going to be really quite great. And from what I've heard and the discussion around that book, it sounds very interesting, very nuanced, and something that you will find something in that text that you can take away from it, or challenge some of your own personal views, or enrich your own views around the subject at hand. And so she was delighted, and she was like, thank you so much. I would have walked out not knowing this. And so yes, I think I just made her a happier customer leaving the bookstore with The Right to Sex as opposed to Sex Will Be Good Again. So yes, that was me 2 hours ago selling this woman hopefully a better read, but who knows? Like I said, All our reading tastes are different. Maybe she's gonna come back and be like, I should have gone with like my gut and just gone with Tomorrow Sex Will Be Good Again. Who knows? Another book that fit into this category is There Is No Such Thing as an Easy Job. And I kid you not, every time I sell a copy of that book, I just have to suppress my urge to be like, don't do it. But I don't. I just let the strangers just go and buy this book. Like I'm no gatekeeper. But if I were to be asked like, oh, what is kind of a workplace book that taps into what this book was trying to do? And you might not see like a complete connection between the two, but I feel as though what the experience that you get from the employees is one that you hoped that There Is No Such Thing as an Easy Job would give you, in terms of speaking about workplace culture and trying to find the humanness in ourselves when we are in a work environment, and what it means to be so immersed in the workplace. And obviously the employees has like a sci-fi twist that No Such Thing as an Easy Job doesn't have, but I think it's the employees is much deeper and is trying to get to much larger ideas, and is wanting the reader to get something much more meaningful than just it being like kind of like a sci-fi, we're orbiting this new planet kind of book. So yeah, that's another one. If you want something that is talking about capitalism and workplace environment and what that means for us as humans, then I would definitely suggest The Employees as opposed to There's No Such Thing as an Easy Job. So yes. Next book that I really did not like, and this will be of no shock to you, that is How Should a Person Be by Sheila Heti. Now, I personally would not recommend that book to anyone, although I know that there are some lovers of that book, my dear friend Eva being one of them. So again, this just shows all our reading tastes are oh so different, hence why we need very different books in this world to please all of our tastes. But if you are looking for a heady experience, I would point you to Motherhood, because I think that it's way more of a worthwhile read. You will walk out of that book with some knowledge, or she would have, scratched a specific itch of engaging with like a philosophical text and being inside this woman's brain and her kind of working through these really big life questions and ideas that are plaguing her everyday thoughts. And yeah, or if you want a novel that is exploring and curious about life and being a young woman in this world, I would also point you to Approaching Eye Level by Vivian Gornick. Now that's nonfiction. Those are essays about the author's life that I found really interesting, way more mature and worthwhile of my time. And I just got something out of that book, especially when it comes to female friendships, which How Should a Person Be focuses quite heavily on. So if you want to read about friendship and observing that through a really interesting, nuanced lens, then I would definitely point you to Approaching Eye Level by Vivian Gornick. Highly recommend. Or like I said, if you are just wanting to be inside a woman's mind, then I would point you to Motherhood. And still, if you're interested and curious about Sheila Heti's work, Motherhood is like the way to go. I would certainly not recommend Pure Color, that's for fucking sure. That is the ultimate polarizing read, and I would just be extremely cautious with who I sell that book to. So yes. Okay, the next book that was such a flop for me is Love in the Big City. And if you are wanting a queer, messy, coming of age story, I would point you to Johnny Appleseed by Joshua Whitehead, who is a phenomenal Indigenous author. That book is an absolute delight. We follow a young queer man who returns to the reservation after the death of his grandmother, and that kind of traumatic event leads him to reflect upon his life growing up in the reserve, colonial violence, settler colonial landscape of Canada. He's a Canadian author, and it's the story is based in Alberta. So gorgeous. It's also kind of raunchy. There's like some pretty descriptive sex scenes, or just talk of sex, which I think there was some of that in Love in the Big City. And it was just a great, exciting, and refreshing read, and just such an authentic perspective and voice, and just such a worthwhile story to read, and very, very impactful. So that's what I would pick. Another disappointing read from last year was Mexican Gothic. That is supposed to be like a horror Gothic thriller book, but it was anything but that. I feel like even if I was in high school, I would have found it so cringy and just cliche and, quite frankly, boring. Like, there was no aspect of that book that was remotely spooky or compelling, or just not Gothic or horror-ish at all. So if you're wanting a Gothic spooky vibe, I would go for The Shadow of the Wind by Carlos Ruiz Zafón. That one is actually Gothic. It is set in the post-Civil War Barcelonan landscape that is so fun to read about. The architecture, the mood, it's just such an atmospheric book that Mexican Gothic wishes it was. So, and the story is also really compelling. So if you're into the plot and atmosphere, kind of very of the place kind of book, then The Shadow of the Wind literally has it all for you. Great story, very plotty, fun characters, and spooky Gothic vibe. If you don't want something uber Gothic, but you want to be spooked and be like, oh my God, I am like really in this world and I'm feeling this heaviness and this moody feeling, then I would suggest Hurricane Season, because you literally just have to read the first chapter and you already feel the tone of the book like you've never felt before. The way that Fernanda Melchor is able to just wrap you in the feeling of this book is absolutely phenomenal. It is super heavy and super dark, and has quite strong language. So again, if you want to be fully drenched in the spooky, like scary, fucked up vibe of a book, then I highly recommend Hurricane Season. Also, if you're reading Mexican Gothic for that Mexican vibe, or you want to be in this like spooky, isolated Mexican town, village in the middle of nowhere, you are also going to get that with Hurricane Season. So those are my two recommendations. Then I have We Cast a Shadow. That was supposed to be a dystopian novel, but also discussing race relations, and it was just so poorly done. I think I DNF'd it, honestly, because it was just not good at all. So if you want a like apocalyptic read that deals with US race relations, I would point you to Leave the World Behind. That is a apocalyptic book, but from the sidelines, we know that there's been this utter crash and collapse of civilization through a family's detached perspective, because the crash is happening in New York City and they are in the Hamptons or somewhere along upstate New York when all of this is taking place, and they're renting this Airbnb, and the owners of the Airbnb are fleeing New York City, and so they show up at their house, and they're a Black couple, and the people that are living in the house or rented the house are white. Very well done. I thoroughly enjoyed that book. It's a very subtle book, so it's not as in your face as We Cast a Shadow, but I think if you are wanting to immerse yourself in that kind of race relation, but let's make it not really our present reality, let's like amp things up a little bit, that might be one that you might be interested in. Or alternatively, if you want something that's more in your face and more intense, then I would say Friday Black, which is a short story collection. that I read recently, and that was just so well done. I think that Friday Black, or We Cast a Shadow, wishes it had accomplished what the stories in Friday Black accomplish. So that's what I would point to. Although I know it's short stories, but trust me, they're mind-blowing. So you will enjoy it. Okay, then the next book that was a complete and utter disaster, which we spoke about recently, is Happy Hour. Now, if you want a fun, easy breezy book following an it girl, or living inside like the glitz and glamour of living in a city like Los Angeles, or in this case, New York, then I would point you to Eve Babbitt's, more specifically either Sex and Rage or Slow Days, Fast Company. Both of those books really get you into the cool girl, artsy fartsy, literary world that the characters in Happy Hour are trying to give you like an insider scoop or a feel of what that is and what that world feels like. But Eve Babbitt is just the absolute queen. That's who we should be reading instead of Happy Hour. So Sex and Rage or Slow Days, Fast Company. Such great reads, super fun, summery vibe that Happy Hour just did not pull through at all. The next one is nonfiction, and it is Uncanny Valley, a book that should have just been an essay. And I actually think that's what it was initially, but she wanted to milk it for more than it was, and then decided to just like extend the word count unnecessarily so, and just write a book when it was just, it needed to stay what it was, which was an essay exposing Silicon Valley. If you want an expose on Silicon Valley, I say you read Bad Blood, which I again have not read, but the cataloged hours in my head are telling me that that is just way better and captivating and just, yeah, worth your time and money, as opposed to Uncanny Valley, which was terrible. And then last but not least, we have Harrow by Joy Williams, which I also DNF'd that book because I was so confused, could not relate to the characters. Not that I need to relate, but like I was just like, the characters were so unbelievable and the dialogue between the characters was detestable and I just couldn't do it. So if you want a really fucking weird apocalyptic read with bizarre characters and you want to just be on this weird trip with them, then I recommend The Passion of New Eve by Angela Carter. That book is a total trip. You start at one point and you go on this wild roller coaster, and the whole time you're like, where is this book gonna go? How is this going to end? It's like 4 books in one. The writing is stupendous. The atmosphere, crazy. Dialogue, impeccable. Vibe, amazing. If you want a trippy ass read, then you've got it right there. It's got it all. So anyway, that is all I have for you. Those are all the books that I could think of that I have not enjoyed and in fact kind of regret reading the past 2 years. Honestly, not as many as I thought. So we're actually doing pretty good. If in 2 years I've only read like a handful of shitty books, then like we're doing pretty good. But yeah, hopefully you got something out of this video and I gave you my very personal opinion on what I thought of these guys and hopefully steering you in the right direction. Let me know if you've read any of these, and if you have loved any of the books that I've hated, we can beef downstairs. Like I'm ready. I feel very firm about all of these. So yeah, we'll see each other soon and hope you're doing well. Bye.